So it's definitely an interesting on verse 10. Yes. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Ajnana Tirandasya Janam Jana Shalakaya Chakshuru Vinitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Svavadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Radha Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupa Sadhyatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhamjitam Sha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Kopesha Kopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sadadevi Bhagavani Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, so I thank you very much for inviting me here. It is such an inspiring project that you have here, so it is a great honor to be here with you today. And we are taking a look at the first canto, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the third chapter, entitled Krishna is the source of all incarnations. Today we are taking a look at text number 10. Panchama kapilo nama Siddhesha kala viplutam Provacha suraye sankyam Tattvagrama vinirnayam Panchama kapilo nama Siddhesha kala viplutam Provacha suraye sankyam Tattvagrama vinirnayam Panchama. The fifth one. Kapila, Nama, of the name. Siddhesha, the foremost amongst the perfect. Kala, time. Viplutam, lost. Provacha, said. Asuraye, unto the Brahmana named Asuri. Sankyam, metaphysics. Tattvagrama, the sum total of the creative elements. Vinirnayam, exposition. Translation. The fifth incarnation, named Lord Kapila, is foremost among perfected beings. He gave an exposition of the creative elements and metaphysics to Asuri Brahmana, for in course of time this knowledge had been lost. Purport. The sum total of the creative elements is 24 in all. Each and every one of them is explicitly explained in the system of Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya philosophy is generally called metaphysics by the European scholars. The etymological meaning of Sankhya is that which explains very lucidly by analysis of the material elements. This was done for the first time by Lord Kapila, who is said herein to be the fifth in the line of incarnations. So in this third chapter of Bhagavatam, we see a enumeration of the various incarnations of the Lord. And it's also important to remember that it is not necessarily in chronological order, because that's the thing with the incarnations of the Lord, is that they are eternal. So they enter into this world at different times, different creations, different yugas. So, but still we see that there is this interesting progression that they follow, that follows one after another. And we find at the end of the second canto, at the first chapter, the second canto, find a very interesting verse that explains the 10 subject matters that are usually found within the Puranas. Atra sargo visargascha sthanam poshanam uttara manvantareshanu kata nirodho muktirashraya. And therein we see that it's explained that there is explained the creation, the sub-creation, the protection of the Lord towards his devotees, the creative impetus, and various 10 different subject matters are delineated. And Lord Kapila, he makes his appearance in the third canto of Bhagavatam. And in the third canto, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the third canto deals with creation, sarga, the creation of the primary elements of the material reality. And it is very interesting how the purpose of the Bhagavatam is explicitly concerned with radical transcendence. That's what the Bhagavatam, that's the unique feature of Bhagavatam, is that it is a scripture that is not at all concerned, that does not pander to mundane sentiments, if one can call it that, in the sense that we see in the 5th chapter of the first canto that Vyasadeva was feeling greatly disturbed because he wrote all these Vedic literatures, but still he was dissatisfied. And then his spiritual master pointed out to him that yes, the reason you are dissatisfied is because you have basically not engaged in just purely glorifying Lord Krishna. So the Bhagavatam is that. It is a book that is purely dedicated to just explaining the reality of Krishna, and not making any kind of compromise, or as they call a cheating religion, where you offer people something else so that they can get, so you try and trick them, which is what a lot of the Vedas is, in a good sense, that you give people the different sciences and knowledge that they would need to find material happiness or find some mental peace, or all these things, with the goal of bringing them later to the spiritual goal. But Bhagavatam is just really taking us directly there. But now what is interesting is in the Bhagavatam is that still such a massive portion and is dedicated towards explaining the material creation, which is very interesting, isn't it? That a text that is supposedly so concerned with radical transcendence at the same time goes through this very clear delineation of all the different material elements, which is what Kapila Muni ultimately teaches, this Sankhya philosophy, as Prabhupada calls this metaphysics. And one can definitely ask why. Why is it? Why does Bhagavatam do that? Such a big part, just explaining the different elements, the mind, the false ego, how the one element develops from another. And there are a few reasons for this. The first reason is, the most important reason, is so that we can ultimately understand that at each step the Lord is completely involved even with the material creation. See, the big problem with the material energy, it is definitely one of Lord Vishnu's, it's one of Krishna's energies. It's also part of his energy. But the problem with this energy specifically is that when the living being finds himself in the conditioned world, he can be easily mistake this energy for something that it is not. This energy, this illusory energy, has this specific ability that if you look at it and you're not looking with the eyes that are basically based on Shastra, then you see the world, and it is very, very easy to see the world and then think that somehow this is separate from Krishna's reality. Somehow this is a separate energy. God is not here. Or somehow this energy, like in the modern world, thinking that this energy is somehow independent of the supreme will. And it is this vision of separateness that causes all our problems. You see, if you look at the world in this vision, then the idea to exploit the world becomes an opportunity, because you think that this energy is free game. You know? I can grab whatever I want. Or what also happens is that then we become greatly attached to the material energy, and then that is also why it is so important to engage in this, why the Sankhya knowledge is so important, because if we understand that behind the material energy there is how it works in a mechanical way, then it is much more easy to become detached from it. You see? Like, for example, you see that one would say, what is the greatest illusion or the greatest attractive feature of the material energy? Is the spontaneous attraction that results when a young man and a woman, when they are in one another's proximity. It is the most amazing thing, isn't it? It is just completely spontaneous. It's like, doesn't have to be taught, and it is something that is completely universal. One would say that is the common denominator amongst all human beings, not even human beings, all species of life, is that if you have the opposite sexes and they just come in one another's proximity, there is immediately some kind of attractive force that is generated. Just like if you have two magnets and they come together, it is just, it's a force of nature. And it is just something that is very, very strong. But then what to do with this? Because and one can say this for a whole variety of material attractions that we have. It is something that just feels so natural. But then as one engages in this Sankhya philosophy, seeing firstly everything in connection with Krishna, but then also just understanding the mechanics of it, then there's this other voice within in the mind that awakens, and then one can see that, yes, okay, I feel this very strongly, but it is just a result of the mode of passion. It's just that's what it is. It's not something metaphysical. It's not something necessarily so romantic as I think it is. No, it is purely a result of the workings of the modes of nature. So that is what Krishna also suggests to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, that to be able to understand that it is really just the modes of nature that are acting, the one from another. And the moment that you see the material energy in this way, that you see that it is just these forces of nature that are moving things around, the modes of nature that are moving things, the different elements that are combining in the body, immediately, just by seeing it like that, there is some detachment that arises. There is some detachment that steps in between us and the material world, when we can see that it is not what I think it is. It is just a mechanical arrangement that is now pulling me in and making me convinced that it looks way more real than it really is. So such a fascinating practice, and definitely something that is cultivated over time as we more and more try to understand how the material energy works, and then immediately from that understanding a detachment starts to arise. And then specifically the vision that is given by Bhagavatam is not just to detach from the material energy, but also to understand that behind the material energy, behind every step, and even and especially in its ultimate source, there is Lord Krishna. There's Lord Vishnu is there, and he is the one ultimately who put this whole thing in motion. And what is also interesting in this verse is that it explained here that at a certain point this knowledge has been lost. And it's interesting how Prabhupada then refers to this in the European traditions, that this kind of knowledge is called metaphysics, and it was a big thing, specifically from the 16th or the 17th century upward, that the European mind again was directed towards trying to understand the material energy, and then that was like for so many centuries that was what was going on, trying to understand how exactly the material energy works. And it is this kind of process that has led us to what we see today with modern science and all its various derivatives. But one can see that it is not so simple. It is really to understand how material energy works, even just mechanically, materially. It cannot be done merely through empirical research, and it is a tricky business, especially in order to understand how the more subtle dimensions of the material world. Which is the forefront of science, isn't it? It is to understand how the mind relates with matter and the relationship between the two. And many brilliant people are scratching their heads trying to figure out how it works. But in Bhagavatam, it is delineated, and there's certain purport in that third canto where Prabhupada says that there is a great source of stock of scientific research. That if people would take this thing seriously and try to see if they could, based on the vision of the Bhagavatam, and move forward, very, very interesting things will happen. And I think with time, definitely it will become important. They just had this big scientific conference, devotee, something studies of consciousness in Florida, that was arranged by the Bhaktivedanta Institute. And it is interesting, now 50 years after Prabhupada, so many years after he launched this mission in the Western world, that very intelligent people are coming into contact with the vision of the Bhagavatam. And with time, as they really research it, and as more devotees get into it and present it to the world, they're understanding that this is something that is very, very profound, and not usually what people would think about as religious knowledge. This idea that religion is something very dogmatic, and it doesn't give room for thinking, or it's just something that you have to accept. But in Bhagavatam, like Prabhupada said, there's great potential for research in this field. And this is all then ultimately what Kapila Muni has taught. What is also interesting about Kapila Muni is that he makes his appearance in the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam, and the whole story of his appearance is very interesting, because there we can also see that he appeared as the son of Kardama Muni. And Kardama Muni was very interesting because he was a very, very serious ascetic, and what was amazing about his life is that he was sitting in this deep meditation, and at a certain point his meditation was successful, and Lord Vishnu appeared before him, which is, that's about as good as it can get. You have your meditation or you chant, and then Krishna appears in front of you. You've been successful. And the interesting thing with Kapila Muni is that what do you do? What happened with him when Lord Vishnu appeared with Kardama Muni? What happened when Vishnu appeared before him? What did he say? What was his reaction? And he basically glorified with the Lord with wonderful prayers. And then he said, "My dear Lord, please send me a wife. I need to get married. I want to get married." And it's very interesting how, we also have this experience how we sometimes read in the Bhagavatam that the Lord gives his devotees a boon. He says to them, "I will give you everything you want." And then we see these devotees that ask for pure devotional service, like Prahlad Maharaj when Lord Nrsingadev asked him. And then we're like, yeah, that's the process. If Krishna appears, then that's what I will ask him. I'm asking for pure devotional service. But we see that in actual fact, I was thinking about it, I don't know if it's so easy as that. If you really know that you can get anything you want to, it's not simply about saying it, but it's really about what's happening within the heart. And the Bhagavatam, then, it basically starts with that. It's explained that there's a progression in the Bhagavatam. Starting from the first 2 cantos, it's explained, deals with, gross, the first incarnations, it deals with gross sinful material desire. And then steadily the Bhagavatam starts to move up. Then we see in the story of Kardama Muni, we see that there we have pious material desire. So he was not sinful, there was not a sinful desire at all. It was all sanctioned according to the codes of Dharma, but still material. And then later on in the further cantos, then we see in the 5th canto, then we see, for example, the story of Bharat Maharaj. And what do we see with Bharat? Then we see what is it that disrupted Bharat's meditation? It was the little deer, that deer. So that's interesting because it explained that the problem there was he thought that he was attached to giving protection to other living beings. He thought that he was the one who will save others. He had this protective bhava that was coming up that ultimately led to him neglecting his sadhana, which is why he fell down. So that's very interesting because that is way more elevated, isn't it? This is not, now we're not speaking just about some material desire to enjoy, but it is something more subtle, a more deeply rooted misconception. The misconception that we are in some kind of we have some kind of a capacity to really save others, and that's how Bhagavatam progresses. It really starts with the bottom, and then it takes us from the bottom, takes us right up to the top, to all the various levels of ignorance ultimately that we have to break through. And it is sometimes it is important to understand that the Bhagavatam is not just a loose connection of stories. It's not just, sometimes the first time you read it, it feels like that. It's just like, okay, there's this story and then there's that story and this. But with time we have to understand how it all fits together, that there's a progression, and that it is a book, a narrative that that is what Prabhupada would call scientific, meaning that it's organized in a specific way to take us from where we are to where we want to be. And then we see here in the third canto, dealing with this level of, Kardama Muni showing us that, yes, that's an important part of spiritual life, is somehow to deal even with our pious material desires, but that we have to transcend. And then we see that's what happens. Kardama Muni, he marries, he gets a wife, he basically creates a massive spaceship. It's like a holiday inn. In one sense, it's fascinating, you read that description. And then he travels throughout all the worlds with a whole host, like a whole band basically. And then at the end he sits down, he makes a child, and then he leaves again. And then this child is Kapila Muni who appears. And what does Kapila Muni explain? He explains then Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya allow us to become detached. So it's very interesting that even for us, especially here, in the Brahmachari ashram, it's also quite an important part of the monastic path, is exactly that. It is to understand that, you see, at an ultimate point, one overcomes material desire by cultivating, by love of God. There's this very interesting verse in the Padyavali by Rupa Goswami where it says that, Cupid, Kamadev, sex desire ultimately, cannot be conquered by putting on saffron cloth, by eating very little, by performing many austerities. It cannot be conquered by any of these mechanical means. Ultimately, the only thing that will conquer it is if one gets love for Krishna. Then there is no space in the heart for material desire to take root. But until then, what is your contingency plan? What is your plan to stay fixed on the process of devotional service? And that's why this comes in. Bhagavatam, Sankhya, knowledge, understanding, the power of, with your intelligence, to understand what is that you are attracted to in the material world. This is also an important part. Definitely not the ultimate thing. It's definitely not going to take you there. If you cannot put all your hopes in that, then spiritual life becomes very dry if you're just trying to do it on knowledge. But definitely something powerful. A weapon that you have to have in important cases, when the love is not there, to be able to then still stay fixed, on deviated by the allurements of the material energy. Then knowledge has to be there. That sword that you can take out to cut, to understand that yes, this does look good, this will probably taste good, or this will feel good, but why will I not go for it? Because at the root I can understand that this thing that I'm looking at, it is part of the material energy, and this passion or this ignorance that is inherent within it, it will pull me and it will take me in a different direction. So by regularly studying, or by really trying to understand what Kapila Muni has taught us, we gain great strength in being able to navigate properly throughout this world, which is ultimately, one sees that the big benefits of getting some distance between us and the material energy is that we just save so much time. That's actually the big thing. A lot of our we see in the modern world, many people really struggle to understand what it is that we are doing, because it seems like a life that is filled with restriction, such a restricted life. It's in the monastic life, but even if you're just a normal devotee, the normal devotee is living a life that is, many people, they do not understand why you would subject yourself to such a variety of rules and restrictions ultimately. Why you would take initiation, take vows to not do so many things. And but this inability to understand this is based on a misconception. It is based on a misunderstanding of how the world works. Meaning that the only way in which you can move in a specific direction, especially come certain attachments and certain addictions, so many addictions that we see within the world that so many people are struggling with. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry to overcome addictions. And but we understand that the only way in which you can overcome your addictions to things that cause you suffering, to overcome your attachments to things that are not good for yourself and for others, is if you generate a lot of focus. You see, you have to become very, very focused, because we have very little time and very little energy. That is basically where the culture of vows and regulation and boundaries come from. It doesn't come from a platform of thinking, of wanting to suppress human nature, or wanting to artificially restrict us, or that you are somehow now being controlled, by some complot. So many people think that there's some of these. If you would read up, like this, I don't know if you ever saw the Zeitgeist movie, for example. That whole conspiracy thing, and then religion is there portrayed as a massive complot by the powers that be to control the people. So not at all. The restrictions that we follow, it comes from understanding that we have to be very, very, very careful with how we use our time and our energy. And to have the sort of knowledge, it allows us to do that. It allows us to bypass things, to not come involved in something, because it will take a lot of time to move through it. And this is what we see also with in spiritual life. We see that many people, the reason why they struggle with spiritual life, especially in the modern world, is not because they are insincere. Many people are very sincere. They are sincerely seeking to move forward towards, to becoming happier, to becoming purer. But the problem is that they have no time. Yeah? I mean, this must be the greatest line that you get, obviously, isn't it? Yeah? They either say, I don't have money, or I don't have time. Do you want a book that will make you happy? No. Why not? Well, I don't have money, or I don't have time to read, which I think is probably more, that people just don't have time anymore. So what an amazing thing that we are here sitting within this movement, within this culture, that has such a profound vision. Such an amazing culture that we enter into, a culture that basically first seeks to protect us from things that waste our time. And then this time that is freed up, then we can use this time to invest in something that will give great benefit, even in this life. So, and we can see more and more people will, that was Prabhupada's vision, that more and more people will start to appreciate this. In the beginning it does not make sense, because the whole world is caught up in this race to move forward on the material platform. And then you have these devotees who are basically just completely, just not complying at all. I think many times, I've experienced it myself, that people actually become angry when they see that you have these people who are not plugged into the system. They're like, actually it upsets them a little, because it's a little bit like, they're working very, very hard, and here you have these people who just wear their weird clothes and they just sing and dance 6 hours a day, and it's like, it's not supposed to, people are not supposed to live like that. But more and more, as people will start to appreciate that we have something, we have a good point. And we see many other movements also, just popular movements. Many people trying now to see that, to start to reduce material needs, so that they can have more time and energy to actually live. And the devotees definitely are on the forefront. We can really share so much with people in terms of helping them to simplify their life. This culture that we have received, the spiritual culture, is so intelligently designed to help us to see how to minimize your material needs, minimize your desires ultimately. Where I'm from in Cape Town, there's a big institute of learning connected with one of the universities there, that are solely dedicated towards the whole crisis of sustainability within the world. The whole crisis that, basically the world is being polluted and consumed, and the environment is going to, get us back for it. And so trying to think, what is the solution to the problem? And, millions of dollars are being spent on research and development, especially on the front of technology, or on the front of, whatever it is, social research, psychology, trying to think how we can change the laws, and all this. There's so much energy going into trying to deal with this reality, because basically the problem that we have is we have our desires, and then we have the resources. And at the moment, the two just don't match up. There's not enough resources to be able to fulfill one's desires. And now they're scratching their heads. How will we do this? How will we somehow or other, better manage our resources? Or how will we somehow or other, by technology, increase the resources that we have? Free energy or all these kind of things. And then what is the most amazing thing is the Bhagavatam vision, the Vedic vision, is just very, very simple. The equation is very, very simple. You don't need millions of dollars of research. You don't need to do all these kind of things. It's very, very simple. You just reduce your desires. You just reduce your desires. You can minimize your desires vastly. You just chop it off. It's just like fat that is on a body, and then you just sweat it out. You just burn off all that excess fat. And that's what the Bhagavatam is doing. It's just saying, reduce. If there's no need for it, throw it away. What's the point? Like you can see, for us, it's amazing how, like if you wear devotional clothes on a regular basis, then imagine that. Imagine how much time and money you spend because you just don't have to spend any money on fashion. Or if you walk through Manhattan, there's millions of stores that are now completely irrelevant for you. It's just like, there's no need for that stores because there's nothing within that store that you have that can actually bring any benefit to you. So, and it goes to such a wide variety of things. This culture of the Bhagavatam, and that's what Prabhupada meant when he said that, we are not just giving a message that has this otherworldly destination. The message of the Bhagavatam is something that is extremely relevant right now to every single person walking on the street, right now to all the various social issues that we have. And the more we ourselves become deeply absorbed in this message and deeply convinced of this message, but definitely convinced by practicing it, by seeing that it is actually possible, and that by following this process of the Bhagavatam, that we see the result is something that is wonderful result. That is really that is the pivot upon which this message will penetrate into the world and touch more and more people. Because most people, the adhikar that you get to read Bhagavatam or to read any kind of scripture, you need an adhikar, a qualification. And this qualification is rooted in some faith. Some faith has to be there. Otherwise, it is impossible. Like you can see for most people, if they would just start reading Bhagavatam, they have no ability to understand. It is just totally far out. And what they can understand, that is also probably quite shocking when they read about the kind of lifestyle that is being presented. So the adhikar is this faith. And this faith can only be received from another person. This is the amazing thing. It is only from another person that has some enthusiasm, some inspiration, some appreciation for this message, that it can be transferred to another person. So that, in one sense, is as we are sitting here in a monastery, that is actually the whole goal of the brahmachari ashram, or of the monastic order especially. It is a group of people, men, that are protected by the society from getting involved with material entanglement, that frees up their time and energy. But why? What are they supposed to do with that time and energy? That time and energy is supposed to be spent in cultivating great faith within the spiritual process. And that faith is then again distributed to society as a whole. It is amazing to understand that we see that the whole economy is a whole intricate structure that is built to distribute money and resources throughout the whole of society. Just like you have the veins in your body, your arteries that take the blood and they take it throughout the whole body. Your toe is so far away from your heart, but there's a system to get this blood, this oxygen, to get it throughout the whole body. And you can see that the moment there's a certain part of the body that does not get this oxygen, doesn't get this blood, then it will very soon rot and it will fall away. So similarly, the aesthetics, the monasteries, that's what it's meant for. It is like a pool where one generates this enthusiasm and inspiration for spiritual life, and then it gets pumped into the rest of society. And it is this that keeps society alive, actually. And now, even though people have no appreciation for this, and it is interesting to see, if you look at the history of especially the Western world, one would see that if you take, for example, a look at the Protestant culture, as you had the Protestant Revolution, that's one of the things that disappeared with the Protestant Revolution, is no monks. No monks. You have the Catholic tradition, they have monasteries, and then you have the Protestants, no monks, no monasteries. The monastic tradition completely disappeared there. And it's interesting how with time these elements, they start to disappear, and then it becomes at a certain point then the religion becomes ineffective. So that is also a great contribution of Prabhupada he again had this vision to create these different sectors of society, to see how they all work together for the welfare of society. And something that we can find great inspiration in, because wherever we find ourselves, a very important part of staying motivated in spiritual life is to have a clear idea of what exactly it is that you are trying to do. A large part of determination, you see, determination is always rooted in a vision, a strong understanding of what it is you're doing and why it is that you're doing it. Because it's like if you walk on a very slippery surface, it's very difficult. But if you have shoes that have traction, then that traction gives you the ability to keep moving forward. So a strong determination is based on a strong vision and a strong understanding of why what I'm doing is something that is meaningful. And as we understand how it is meaningful, it gives us a grip. And this grip, it gives us the grip to keep moving forward. So that is why this culture of studying Bhagavatam is so amazing, so that we can get this vision and then take this vision back down into our personal life, wherever it is that we are, and be able to see how everything is connected, and see how the energy that we are investing into Krishna consciousness is something, how this energy will translate into good results for ourselves and for others. And by this vision, our determination increases, and we can stay very fixed on the path of devotional service. Okay. Is there any questions or any comments on something that has been said? Yes, bro.
So you're talking about how it's good for cultivating knowledge to be able to get detachment from the world. But I was wondering if you could kind of connect that to like devotional service, like in the second chapter of the Bhagavatam, saying like, by cultivating devotional service, naturally detachment and knowledge come automatically. As a natural course. Yes, yeah. Good point. So we understand that everything that we use has to have its connection to the ultimate, with the source. So by performing devotional service, then these things come as a natural consequence. But we can also see that devotional service, for example, means reading Bhagavatam, which is a text that is totally dedicated to devotional service. Reading Bhagavatam is devotional service. And if you read Bhagavatam, then you will get everything. You will get knowledge, you will get detachment, you will get the understanding of how the world works. So one would say that, so there's, you see, the risk, what can happen in life is that you get something that is good, but the moment that there's something that is good and you think that this is the ultimate good, then it can become a distraction. For example, knowledge is good. It is good. It's an important part of life. Something that has to be cultivated. But if you think that if you make that the ultimate goal, then that becomes the problem. So that's why even in our studies and in our practices, we always understand that to see everything in connection with Krishna. To see that the goal of, like for example, you see how Prabhupada, there was once a story where Guru Das, I believe it was him, they were going for a walk, and then they were going for a walk on the beach, and they all had shoes, but he was bare feet, and then he was like really struggling to walk, and Prabhupada says, why are you doing this? And then he said, oh Prabhupada, for you I would walk on hot coals or something like that. And he said, doesn't matter, I don't care about this. Basically saying that, I'm renounced, I don't care about how difficult it is to walk here. And then Prabhupada just basically told him, he said, you said the world is already so full of austerity, why would you increase it? Why would you increase it? So that's the point, is that we only take the knowledge and the renunciation that is necessary for the service of Krishna. I have one story of a devotee who was also brahmachari for many years, and he and one friend, they got into this thing. They got a little bit of a kick out of performing austerities. That sort of became their thing. Like whatever it is, fasting or
trying to see how quote unquote renounced they can become from various material needs. And then the spiritual master, he wrote them a letter, and they were speaking with him, and he sort of saw what was happening, and he wrote them a very interesting letter, and he said that yes, it is true that austerities or renunciation can purify us. That is a fact. You do become purified to a certain extent from material desires and attachments by the practice of renunciation. But then he said, but actually what purifies us even more is ecstasy. That's an interesting thing. Like spiritual ecstasy also purifies. It also actually purifies us. Purifies us a lot from, and one would say much more powerful and much more quicker. Isn't it true? Like when you are in a very ecstatic devotional experience, how renounced you are, how renounced we are, just automatically. And he said, and he wrote in that letter that he said that, so he requested them, I request you to simply take responsibility for preaching Krishna consciousness. And he said, within that, all the austerities that you will have to perform, it will just come as a natural consequence, and you don't have to look for anything else. So that is the vision that we also get from Bhagavatam, that one simply makes devotional service our primary priority, and then whatever comes in the course of this devotional responsibilities, whether it is ecstasy that purifies us, or whether it is great difficulties and tribulations, then that will purify us. And then our cultivation of knowledge or renunciation, then it is all connected. Then it is all connected with devotional service, and then it will be something that will take us towards the right direction, and not then something that becomes a distraction. So thank you very much. That's a very nice question. Yes, Gopal Champu.
Thank you for your class. One thought I had was how to maintain our vision. How to maintain a strong vision. What do you suggest as far as maybe what do you do yourself?
Strong vision.
To keep a strong vision.
Well, what is interesting is that there is what we have to understand is that the material world, everything is temporary. So in the material world, whatever you build, it becomes there's an onslaught of time to erode it. Like if you build a building, at a certain point you have to paint it again, because just simply by the wind blowing sand, just by the wind blowing and by the rain falling and by the sun shining, a building will the paint starts to just disappear. It starts to erode. So the material energy, there's this erosive element. Whatever you build in this world, it has to be maintained. It has to be again built up. It has to be repaired, because it just becomes eroded. So similarly, when you speak about a vision, it means now you're building something in the internal world. You see, it means that just like you build something, like say this identity, for example, it's an external identity. It means, okay, you put on a certain cloth, you put on certain markings, you create this devotional identity within the external world. Now, it is temporary, but it is also spiritual. Your eternal identity is not the Gopal Champu Das. At a certain point, you will have to give up that name, but still, it's spiritual. It is connected, just like the form of the deity. Even though it is made of the material elements, but it is fully spiritual. But it will also not necessarily last forever in the strict sense, just like this body or this clothes. So we have to then maintain it, isn't it? We have to, every day you clean the body, you have to clean your clothes, because that's what the material element works like that. So similarly, your vision, your vision, one would say, is the condition of what's going on inside. Your desires, your goals, your determination. Now these things also, you build it up, you have a certain clear goal in your mind of what you want to become, and then it will also be eroded. Time will attack it. And what really attacks your internal vision is the modes of passion and ignorance. They start to they knock away at it, and it gets sort of reduced at a certain point. Yes? And then that's just what we all feel in our life. We sometimes feel periods of great inspiration, and that great inspiration you will see when you are greatly inspired in devotional service. It means you can clearly see the meaning of what you're doing, and you clearly have a goal. You have a clear goal. Prabhupada says that disturbance of the mind is due to a lack of an ultimate goal. No goal means your mind will be disturbed, because the mind will then be moved by the material energy. So I would say that to understand that your vision, it's not something that you have to, it's not something that you get and then it's there forever. No, it has to be maintained. It has to be built up, restored, repaired on a regular basis, just like you have to do with anything physical. So that one will have to find for himself different ways to do it. You know, like something that I personally do is I try to, if you think about the whole principle of Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. So this is when we start speaking about vision. This is the Vedic idea of the vision. This is when you speak about vision, it means you have a clear understanding of these three things. What is my relationships? You know, what is my responsibilities, and where do I ultimately want to go? Now, what is interesting, what I can share is from this book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you ever read it, famous bestseller book on personal development, you know. Now, what is good is he has this exercise, and he says that what you should do is you outline your roles. You know? Each of us, we have a wide variety of roles. Like, for example, okay, you're a brahmachari, but you're not just a brahmachari. You're also a resident of this ashram, you know, of this house. You are also a son. Yeah? You are also maybe a brother. You are also a human being. You know? So you have all these different roles that you have, and each of your roles, they have certain responsibilities. You know? Because you live in this house, you have certain responsibilities. Because you're a brahmachari, you have certain responsibilities. And ultimately, each of these destinations, each of these identities, they have a certain goal. You know? There's a reason why why are you a brahmachari? There's a reason why you want to be a brahmachari. Why are you all these things? So the first step in a vision is to have great clarity. Clarity, what is my duties? You see, you would see also that's why Prabhupada was so heavy initially. So many things that he stressed very severely, very strongly, repeatedly. And you'll see that it generally, oftentimes it was an emphasis of our duties. What if you have a very clear idea of what are all your duties, then that clarity, from that you will get a clear vision. And you will see that as you start to neglect your duties, then the vision will start to disappear. For example, if you are a brahmachari, let's think about some of the core values of a brahmachari, some of the core duties of what it means to be a brahmachari. Well, one of them, for example, is to memorize verses. Many places, that's one of the things that are sort of part of the brahmachari identity. You have to study scripture, and you have to take your mind, and you have to memorize verses and really engage with the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Now, okay, that's one of them. Another thing, for example, is you have to be very careful of your dealings with the opposite sex. Certain principles that you have, that you implement in your life, certain things, parameters that you know. I never do this, I never do that, whatever it is, you have certain principles that you have. And then, what else is there? You have to, I don't know, in an ashram setting, then you also have a whole variety of duties that you have towards the ashram. Now, what happens in the material world is that regularly we make exceptions. Sometimes it's just you cannot do it. You have a vow that you will read every day for such a long time, or you will study this, or you do that. But then sometimes, we have to start making exceptions. A very busy time, and you start to slack off. Now you will see that as you slack off of the duties of a specific role, then your dedication towards that role will start to disappear. You understand? The more one invests in the duties of an ashram or in the duties of a specific goal, then the more clear that identity becomes, and then the more we can take shelter of that identity. And the more you don't do that, the more you don't do these personal things, these subtle things, these things that no one will know. No one will know if you're really doing what you're supposed to be doing. Then the vision will start to fade up. Then you will not understand anymore. Then you will be like, why am I doing this? Why am I a brahmachari? Or why am I a devotee even? You can see if a devotee, if you stop chanting your rounds, then you'll be like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting on this clothes? Why am I putting on this tilak? Why am I putting on these clothes? So that is how we cultivate the vision, is by having a clear idea of our duties and also clear goals, and then by investing in these on a regular basis. And to see that sometimes it has to be maintained. It has to be maintained, because that's just how life goes. Lord Brahma, when he created the material energy, he was offering his prayers to Lord Vishnu to please protect me. Please protect me from this goal of creation, because it's dangerous business to work with material energy. And then Lord Vishnu appeared, and he says in the verse, he says, yes, I will protect you. I will protect you from this vicious mode of passion. The mode of passion is vicious, because it can erode anything. if you work within this world and you see it, basically it eats us up and it erodes you. I mean, the city, you can see it. This whole city is like a gaping mouth that is just swallowing people, because it's just this passion that erodes us. So for many of the practices in spiritual life, that's why we see that the mode of goodness is something that is different than that. You cannot always just be working, on this external energy, with the external energy. Then you will become depleted, and then you will not understand why it is that you are doing it. So that's why the internal cultivation, sadhana, as we say, but not just sadhana, but also really absorption, to really become absorbed. It is in this absorption that we find great determination, And also, Prabhupada says that, interesting quote, Prabhupada says that there's a letter that he read from a judge. This is an interesting point. So there's a judge in one of the court cases, he said something, and then Prabhupada said that it was very humorous. Prabhupada found it very funny. And then he said in this letter, he says, actually any cultured gentleman, he must be humorous. So I think that is also an important part of cultivating a regular vision, especially within a movement like us that is so serious, is that you have to also have some humor in your life, because there's a lot of there's also have a restorative energy that comes from that. So, in any case, this was just some thoughts. We can have a whole seminar on that, but something at least to think about. Yes, Prabhu.
You were saying in the beginning of class that when you give them books, they say, "I don't have money, I don't have time." And things we say when they say, "I don't have time," is we say, "You read it before you die."
Yeah.
So that's just a comment. But my other thing was that I was listening to a conversation with Prabhupada, and he was saying the reasons why we have these farm communities and all these are because people can come and just I'm paraphrasing, of course, but they can just unwind from the erosion of the modes of passion and ignorance, and then they can come to the platform where they can actually sit and chant and read our books.
Yeah.
So I was saying how important it is focus on that aspect of things also, that people can't really afford to wake up at 4. Living in this Ugra-karma society, it's hard for people to wake up at 4 a.m. every day, chant their rounds, read Prabhupada's book for an hour or two, and go about their business.
Yeah. Yes, very good point, and that that's the ultimate solution, and then also it's I guess that at the moment we have to also create, at least what you're doing here, for example, is the same thing, like what Prabhupada called a spiritual oasis. Yeah. Even though we live within a city, but we actually follow a culture that's totally different from the city. And the more we can help people to understand, if you look at agriculture, for example, you go to certain parts of the world, then you just cannot grow certain things, like papayas or mangoes. They only grow in a certain kind of climate. But if you have a greenhouse, then you can grow papayas in the middle of freaking Sweden, or you can grow it somewhere in the northern hemisphere even. So similarly, that's actually what we are doing. Often to a lot of extent, we're building these little greenhouses. So even though you're in a climate that is totally opposed to many of the practices that spiritual life requires, you can create these little spaces that people can come in and they can taste papayas. And they're like, "Wow, geez, this is wonderful. Where do you get this?" And you're like, "Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it's not so easy to grow it here, but you can grow it." So this to help teach others this culture, and like I was saying, what's happening here is a good example. Doing something that is, that can nourish other people. But for the general mass of people, and that's Prabhupada also said, at a certain point to build these big communities where people can go en masse. And that's what I also said. They said that
people come to our farms
in millions. They will come, and they will come because they are hungry. Yeah. So hopefully they don't come soon, because then we will have a problem.
There's an online question by Bhakta Ankit. It says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, it was a brilliant class. My question is, if someone analytically observes and studies material nature, a very thoughtful and intelligent person can come to a conclusion that there is certainly a higher power who is controlling and managing material affairs and its movements. Unfortunately, such a study will come to the impersonal ultimate controller as a conclusion, as I do see this happening. There are many theistic people who are thoughtful and intelligent, including such scientists, but they are not able to see the personality behind such controlling. They believe that there is some sort of higher energy, there is some sort of supreme controller. Is there any chance for such people to believe in the person as a supreme controller without meeting devotees? I do not see any chance for such people to come to such a conclusion on their own accord.
Well, that's a very interesting question. It is true. Generally, we see that in isolation, people just follow the speculative process to understand they can come to quite a high level. You know, sometimes you see some very intelligent people that have really, if you read their books or you read what they're saying, you're like, wow, this person really, they got quite far. But there definitely is a certain cap that you reach. There's a certain platform that you just cannot, you cannot look beyond it. And all that you see then is this effulgent light of the something. Like we see, for example, you look at Plato. So, Plato, he wrote, he was definitely into understanding the material energy, and he wrote about this idea of the world of forms, that there's this ultimate world of archetypes, and that this world is just a reflection of that world. That this world is just a reflection of that world. And the things that you see in this world, their ultimate origin is in this pure realm, the realm of forms. And then he says, but even amongst these forms, there is a special form. He says it is the form of the true, the good, and the beautiful. And that is that form that all other forms emanate from. Now that's amazing because, isn't it? That is Sat, Chit, and Ananda, isn't it? Eternality, knowledge, and bliss. The true, the good, and the beautiful. So we look at it and we're like, wow, Plato, you got it, like you got it. But he didn't. He didn't completely get it, because ultimately one can only receive knowledge of the personality of Godhead from a devotee, from someone who knows him. So yeah, that is how it goes. But we can see that it's not in waste, because if you meet someone who has progressed to this point, like for example, you have the Kumaras. The Kumaras, they just sniffed the tulsi from the lotus feet, and then they're like, oh, this is the source. This is the real source. So we should get people where they are and take them forward. But especially in the modern world, most people, when they engage in speculative traditions, they will definitely struggle. Very difficult to come to a personal conclusion, because impersonalism is preached so broadly. And also, this also has to be pointed out that in general, one of the reasons why it is also, if there is impiety, one will also naturally go towards an impersonal conclusion, because if there is a personal God, then it means that we have to surrender to another person's will. And the impious mind does not like this idea. The impious mind has very bad experiences in this regard. So yes, what can we do? That's why we have to go out there and to connect people with personalism, which is really our unique contribution. You see, there are many other people who are also into Sankhya. There are many other Sankhya texts, people studying Sankhya like anything. But the Bhagavatam Sankhya, that's the difference. That's the difference with the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam adds that final point to understand that yes, you have this whole material energy that comes from this ultimate source, but that ultimate source is a person. And this is the real magic of what we are presenting to the world. And the interesting thing with this is that it cannot, at a certain point, it cannot be understood. The only way in which one can come to the conclusion that God is a person is if one ultimately renders devotional service. It is by the process of the act of rendering service and then experiencing the reciprocation of God that convinces us that there is a person. You can never just do it purely by intellect. Even if you accept that theoretically God is a person and exists, it's not very deep. So that is why the power of engaging people in devotional service, it is that has this, that can really give a great sense of faith. And this is what we see in this world. Many of us, most of us actually, not particularly very intelligent or very well versed in the deeper intricacies of metaphysics, but by once tasting this great ecstasy that comes from making this connection with Krishna, feeling Krishna's reciprocation in devotional service, then we become very convinced. And we have to regularly go for this And that I would say also importantly links in with your question of vision, like to be able to regularly maintain the vision. In this day and age in which we're living in today, you can make all your tricks and your process and your program and your sadhana sheet and all this kind of stuff, which is very important, and we have to do it because it's good for us. But at the ultimate end, it is the basis upon all these things is the special taste that comes from experiencing the ecstasy that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is freely distributing. And we have to regularly keep a connection with that. And I would like to end off with a very nice verse. Fortunately, I don't have myself in here, but this is a very nice verse, also taught by Kapila Muni in I think it is the 28th chapter of the 3rd canto, where he enumerates the process of yoga, and he explains how one should meditate upon the different limbs of Lord Vishnu. And you start from the feet and you move up, and then he says that then one should meditate on the smile. It says on the smiling glance of Lord Vishnu, which has the ability to evaporate the ocean of tears that has arisen from material grief. So what an amazing idea, that ultimately it is by experiencing the smile of Krishna that all ignorance and all misgivings within the heart can really be dissipated. And that is what we have to offer to the world. So I think we would end here, 8:45. Thank you very much. Grantaraj, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki, Śrīla Prabhupada ki, Go Premanande.
Vilas Prabhu ki.